It was a hot day in Adelaide, the kind of day that feels like summer itself. January 26, 1966, Australia Day. For most people, it was a holiday, a day for the beach, for family, for a break from the heat. That's what it was for the Beaumont family. Jim and Nancy Beaumont had 3 children. Jane, the oldest, was 9. She was responsible. She was the one who looked after her younger siblings. Arnna was 7. She was the quieter one, and Grant, the only boy, was just 4. He was full of energy. They lived in a small brick house on Harding Street in Somerton Park, a suburb of Adelaide. It was a short bus ride to Glenelg Beach. The kids loved the beach. They had been there many times before. Jane was old enough to take her brother and sister on her own. It was a different time back then. A time when kids had more freedom. It wasn't unusual for a 9-year-old to be in charge. That morning, the children were excited. They wanted to go to the beach. Nancy Beaumont was a little hesitant. It was a hot day, and the beach would be packed. But Jane insisted. She was a good girl. She knew the routine. They would take the bus from the stop near their house. It was a 5-minute trip. They were to stay on the main part of the beach near the Collie Reserve. They knew not to talk to strangers. They had money for the bus fare and for a snack. Nancy gave Jane 8 shillings and 6 pence. They were to be back on the 12 o'clock bus. The noon bus. The kids left the house around 10 in the morning. Jane wore her swimsuit with a pair of shorts over the top. Arnna and Grant were dressed for the beach too. They walked to the bus stop. They got on the bus. Everything was normal, just 3 kids going to the beach on a hot summer day. Nancy Beaumont waited at home. Noon came and went. The 12 o'clock bus arrived, but her children weren't on it. She wasn't overly worried at first. Maybe they missed it. Maybe they were having so much fun they lost track of time. She thought they would be on the next bus, the 1 o'clock bus, but the 1 o'clock bus came and they weren't on it. Now, a knot of worry started to form in her stomach. She waited for the 2 o'clock bus. Her heart pounded as it pulled up. She scanned the faces of the people getting off. No Jane, no Arnna, no Grant. The worry turned to panic. This was wrong. Jane was responsible. She would have come home. She would have called if something was wrong, but there was no call. There was nothing. Nancy went to the bus depot. She asked the drivers. No one remembered seeing the children. When Jim Beaumont came home from work around 3 p.m., Nancy was distraught. He immediately drove to Glenelg Beach. The place was still crowded. People were packing up, heading home. He walked up and down the sand, calling their names. He searched the area around the jetty, the amusement park, the little shops. He asked people if they had seen his children. No one had. It was like they had vanished into the hot, salty air. By 5 p.m., there was still no sign of them. The sun was getting lower in the sky. The beach was emptying out. The feeling of dread was overwhelming. Jim and Nancy Beaumont went to the police. They reported their 3 children missing. The police took it seriously right away. An initial search was launched that evening. Police officers and volunteers scoured the beach and the surrounding sand dunes. They searched the parklands. They looked in every shed and public toilet. They found nothing. Not a towel, not a shoe, not a single piece of their clothing. It was as if the children had simply been erased. The next morning, the story was everywhere. The disappearance of the 3 Beaumont children was front-page news. The entire nation was gripped by the story. How could 3 children just disappear from a crowded beach in broad daylight? It didn't make sense. As the police investigation ramped up, witnesses started to come forward. A picture of the children's last known hours began to emerge. It was a confusing and deeply disturbing picture. Several people remembered seeing the children at the beach. They were playing under the sprinklers on the lawn of the Collie Reserve. They were seen near the Glenelg jetty. They seemed happy. They were playing with another person. As a man. Witnesses described him as tall and thin. He had fair to blonde hair, a suntan complexion, and a lean, athletic build. He was probably in his mid-30s. He was wearing swimming trunks. He seemed friendly. The children seemed to know him. They were laughing and playing with him. Jane, the responsible one, looked comfortable. She wasn't trying to get her siblings away from him. This was the first detail that chilled investigators to the bone. This wasn't a violent abduction. It looked like a carefully planned seduction. A local shopkeeper said the children came into his bakery around 11 a.m. They bought some pasties and a meat pie. They paid with a £1 note. Nancy Beaumont was certain she hadn't given them a pound note. She had given them coins. Where did they get the money? Did the man give it to them? It seemed likely. It suggested he was trying to win their trust. Then came the most crucial sighting. A postman who knew the Beaumont family well saw the children around 11:45 a.m. They were walking away from the beach. They were alone. They were walking along Jetty Road in the direction of their home. The postman waved to them. They waved back. They seemed happy. He said they were skylarking, just being kids. He thought nothing of it at the time. He assumed they were heading home, but they never got home. What happened in those minutes after the postman saw them? The police timeline was a mess. They were supposed to be on the noon bus. Why were they walking away from the beach at 11:45? Where were they going? Another witness, a woman, came forward with an even more disturbing story. She said she saw a man who matched the description, along with the 3 children, getting into a blue car a little after noon. She couldn't remember the make or model, but she remembered the children. They seemed to be going willingly. One of the younger children even helped the man put a bag in the car. The police now had a prime suspect. This tall, thin, blonde man. They had a sketch made based on the witness descriptions. The sketch was plastered on newspapers and television screens across the country. He became known simply as the Man. But who was he? No one seemed to know. The search for the children was one of the largest in Australian history. Police, soldiers, and hundreds of volunteers combed every inch of the Adelaide Plains and the nearby Adelaide Hills. They searched reservoirs, abandoned buildings, mine shafts. They drained canals. They found nothing. The parents, Jim and Nancy, were living in a waking nightmare. Their home was surrounded by reporters. Their lives were put under a microscope. Every day they waited for a phone call, a knock on the door. Every day brought fresh torment and no answers. They left the children's beds made, their toys where they had left them. They kept a light on in the house at all times, just in case the children came home in the dark. The case took a strange turn months later. Nancy Beaumont received 2 letters. They were postmarked from Dandenong, a suburb of Melbourne. One was addressed to her. The other was addressed to the police. The letter to Nancy was supposedly written by Jane. It described a pleasant life with the man. It said he was being kind to them. It said they were all okay. The second letter, from the man himself, claimed he was the children's new guardian. He said he would return them at a designated time and place. The police were immediately suspicious. The tone of the letters was odd. The handwriting didn't seem like a 9-year-old's, but they had to take it seriously. It was the only lead they had. They arranged to meet the man at the designated spot. The parents waited nearby, their hearts full of a desperate, fragile hope. The police were hidden, watching. But the man never showed up, and the children were not returned. The police later discovered the letters were a cruel hoax. A teenager in Melbourne, who had been following the case, admitted to writing them. He thought it was a joke. For Jim and Nancy Beaumont, it was another devastating blow. The desperation of the case led the police and the public to look for answers in unusual places. A Dutch psychic, Gerard Croizet, was brought to Australia. He was famous in Europe for supposedly helping police solve crimes. The community raised money to fly him over. Croizet claimed he had a vision. He saw the children's bodies buried under the concrete floor of a new warehouse. He gave a specific location. The media went into a frenzy. The warehouse was identified. The public donated money to have the floor dug up. For days, the nation watched as workers with jackhammers broke through the concrete. The sense of anticipation was immense, but they found nothing. No bodies, no clothes. Just dirt and pipes. The psychic's vision was a dead end. It was another moment of false hope, followed by crushing disappointment. The years turned into decades. The case never went cold, but the leads dried up. The file on the Beaumont children grew thicker and thicker, filled with thousands of interviews, dead-end leads, and crank calls. The parents grew older. The hope that their children were alive and would one day return began to fade, replaced by a dull, constant ache. Over the years, several suspects have been seriously considered by police. Each one presents a tantalizing, but ultimately unprovable theory. One of the most compelling suspects was a man named Arthur Stanley Brown. Brown was a convicted child killer. He was arrested in 1998 for the murders of 2 young sisters in Townsville in 1970, 4 years after the Beaumonts disappeared. When police looked into his past, they found chilling connections. In 1966, Brown was working in Adelaide. He bore a striking resemblance to the police sketch of the man. He was tall, thin, with a similar facial structure. People who knew him said the sketch was a dead ringer for him. He also worked at a factory in Plympton, an Adelaide suburb. That factory was very close to the warehouse that the psychic, Gerard Croizet, had identified. It was a bizarre coincidence that made police take a closer look. Brown was known to be a meticulous planner. His later crimes showed a pattern of luring children, not snatching them. He would gain their trust before taking them. This matched the witness accounts from Glenelg Beach. The problem was there was no physical evidence linking Brown to the Beaumont case. He was never charged. He developed Alzheimer's disease and died in prison in 2002, taking any secrets he had to the grave. Another prime suspect was Bevan Spencer von Einem. Von Einem was a notorious Adelaide predator, convicted in 1984 for the murder of a 15-year-old boy. He is also the main suspect in a series of horrific crimes known as the family murders, where several young men were abducted and murdered in Adelaide during the late 1970s and early 1980s. A witness, identified only as Mr. B, told police that he had a conversation with von Einem where the man boasted about killing the Beaumont children. According to the witness, von Einem said he had taken the children from the beach to his house. He performed experiments on them. He said he had killed them and dumped their bodies near a drain pipe in the scrublands south of Adelaide. The police took this claim very seriously. They had long suspected von Einem. His physical appearance in the 1960s was similar to the sketch of the man at the beach. He was known to frequent the Glenelg area. The details of his later crimes showed a level of depravity that made him a plausible suspect. But the witness's testimony was uncorroborated. It was one man's word against another's. Von Einem has always denied any involvement. He remains in prison for his other crimes, a dark shadow hanging over the Beaumont mystery. A third person of interest emerged much later, a man named Harry Phipps. Phipps was a wealthy factory owner and a prominent member of the Glenelg community in the 1960s. He was also a known pedophile. His own son came forward after his death and told police he believed his father was responsible for the Beaumont disappearance. The son remembered seeing the 3 children in his father's backyard on the day they went missing. He said he was told to go away by his father. He also remembered his father digging a large hole in the factory yard later that day. Phipps looked very much like the police sketch. He lived only a few hundred meters from Glenelg Beach. The story seemed plausible. This new information led to a major excavation in 2018. British police and forensic teams descended on the factory site where Phipps had worked. They used ground-penetrating radar to search for anomalies in the soil. They dug up a specific area where the son believed the children might be buried. Once again, the nation watched and held its breath. And once again, they found nothing. Just animal bones and old rubbish. It was another dead end. The list of suspects and theories goes on. Some believe the children were taken by a religious cult. Some believe they were sold and taken overseas. There was a report of a woman in Canberra who claimed she was Jane Beaumont, but it turned out she was mentally unwell, and her story didn't add up. Every few years, a new lead or a new theory emerges, sparking a brief flurry of media attention before fizzling out. For Jim and Nancy Beaumont, the years of not knowing were a unique form of torture. They never moved from their home on Harding Street for many years. They were afraid that if they left, the children might come back and not know where to find them. They lived with the constant presence of the media and the public's morbid curiosity. Strangers would drive by their house, slowing down to stare. In their grief, they became reclusive. They divorced, though they remained in contact. Nancy, in particular, was haunted by the what-ifs. What if she hadn't let them go to the beach that day? What if she had insisted they wait for her? These were questions with no answers, a burden she carried for the rest of her life. Eventually, they sold the house. They left a forwarding address with the new owners, just in case. They lived out their final years quietly, away from the public eye. Nancy Beaumont passed away in 2019. Jim Beaumont died in 2023. They went to their graves without ever knowing what happened to their children. They never had a body to bury, a grave to visit. They were left with nothing but a void. The disappearance of the Beaumont children changed Australia forever. It marked the end of an era. Before that day, Australia saw itself as a safe, innocent country, a place where kids could roam free, where communities looked out for each other. After that day, a shadow fell. Parents held their children tighter. The freedom kids once enjoyed was curtailed. Stranger danger became a household term. The front door was locked. The world suddenly seemed like a much more dangerous place. The beach at Glenelg is still there. It's still a popular spot on a hot summer day. But for anyone who knows the story, it's impossible to look at it without a feeling of sadness. It's a place frozen in time, the scene of the nation's most haunting mystery. What happened to Jane, Arnna, and Grant Beaumont? The most likely scenario, the one most police investigators believe, is that they were abducted and murdered on the day they disappeared. They fell into the hands of a predator, a man who expertly gained their trust with a smile, a kind word, and a bit of money for a pie. A man who led them away from the crowded beach to a car, to a house, to their deaths. Their bodies have never been found. No one has ever been charged. The man in the sketch has never been definitively identified. He is a ghost, a faceless monster who stole 3 children and a nation's innocent. The case remains open, the police file is still active, but with every passing year, the chances of finding a definitive answer grow slimmer. The witnesses are old or gone. Memories have faded. The physical evidence, if there ever was any, is long lost to time. All that's left is the story. The story of a hot day, a trip to the beach, and 3 smiling children who walked off the sand and into a mystery that has never been solved. They are forever 9, 7, and 4 years old. They are Australia's lost children, a permanent scar on the national psyche. And the question remains, hanging in the hot summer air, just as it did in 1966, what happened to the Beaumont children? We may never know.